Welcome to the Voices for Voices podcast, sponsored by Redwood Living. Thank you for joining us today. I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, host and humanitarian. You can learn more about Voices for Voices on our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channel at Voices for Voices and our website, voicesforvoices.org. Voices for Voices is a 501c3 nonprofit charity organization that survives solely on donations. So if you're able to, please consider heading over to voicesforvoices.org to help us continue our mission and the goal and dream of mine to help 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. Or you can also send a donation to the mailing address of Voices for Voices at 2388 Beckett Circle, Stowe, Ohio 44224. We're also available on the Cash App at Voices for Voices. Are you or somebody you know looking for a volunteer opportunity? If so, please reach out to us today via email at president@voicesforvoices.org. Now, I founded Voices for Voices to provide a platform for folks to share their stories with others as we work to break the stigma around mental health, accessibility, and disabilities, helping get people the help they need while also helping them prepare or transition into the workforce with the Voices for Voices Career Center, where we connect talent with opportunity for both job seekers and employers alike, from coast to coast and in every industry and job level. And who can forget about merchandise? The Voices for Voices merchandise shop is up and running at voicesforvoices.org/shop, where shipping is always free. And again, all donations are 100% tax deductible. Please welcome and join me today in welcoming our guest. She has been inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, has earned the Dole Leadership Prize, appeared on screen in A Mother's Courage, Talking Back to Autism, a documentary narrated by actress Kate Winslet, and the inspiration behind the 2010 biography drama titled Temple Grandin, to which actress Claire Danes won a Screen Actors Guild Award and Golden Globe Award playing Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin has also written many award-winning books, including Navigating Autism, Visual Thinking, and her latest release, Autism in Education, The Way I See It, where Dr. Grandin discusses the real issues that parents, teachers, and kids face every day. And Dr. Grandin has also been honored with a sculpture housed within the JBS Global Food Innovation Center on the campus of Colorado State University, where she joins us from today. She's also listed as one of the top 10 college professors in the United States, and is acknowledged as the preeminent authority on animal behavior. It is an honor and pleasure to introduce our guest, Dr. Temple Grandin. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Grandin.
It's great to be here today.
Absolutely. And for our viewers and listeners, you'll see another individual. That's Heidi LaRue. She is on the Voices for Voices board. She is a supervising counselor, art therapist, and chemical dependency counselor. So she'll be jumping in from time to time asking questions. So Dr. Grandin, just want to start out by getting your feedback on, I understand that art for you the interest came at an early age. How did that manifest itself? And then throughout your career, how did you see maybe the changes and the ebbs and flows to that?
Well, when I was a little kid, probably third grade or so, came obvious I was good at art, but I would tend to just draw the same horse head over and over again. So my mother always encouraged me to don't draw the whole horse, draw the stable, draw the saddle. What you want to do is something a kid gets fixated on is broaden it and expand it. Okay, let's say it was cars. Well, read about them, do math with them. Take that interest and expand them. I was just talking to a mother the other day, and her kid loves excavating machines. Well, you can learn about how those work. You know, how do hydraulic systems work? I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do to expand that interest. And then in my career, I've designed livestock handling facilities. That certainly used my art interest. Now, everything that I was doing beforehand was, just done freehand.
Okay.
And there was one assignment that I had in college that was really good. And we had to spend an hour and a half art class drawing a picture of our own shoe. Each student had to take one of their shoes off, put it out just in front of them while they're sitting in a chair in about the 3/4 position, like this, and draw it very slowly with pencil without erasing to make you see the shoe. And that was a really useful assignment. I had a really ratty old sneaker that I drew, and I wish I still had that drawing. And then when I got involved with the design of cattle handling facilities, I had no idea how to do drafting. And I worked for a while at a feedlot construction company, and there was a draftsman there named Davy Jones, and he was a absolutely wonderful draftsman. And I saw, well, how does he do it? Also, I found that using the ruler forced my mind to really slow down.
Okay.
So that I can see the thing that I'm drawing. And I draw mostly steel and concrete construction. And I saw how Davy would make a pipe look round, how he would draw the concrete part, the dirt part. And then I used the same instruments that he used.
Wow.
But you have to develop talent.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. The other thing I had to learn how to do is how to relate a flat blueprint to a building. Like, for example, on a drawing of a building, there might be little squares in the building. And those little squares are columns. And the way I learned how to understand the squares was to take the drawing for the Swift meatpacking plant, this would be back in early 70s, walk around the plant with the floor plans.
Okay.
And they included even the parking lot stripes in this floor plan to where I could relate everything on that drawing to the actual equipment and structure in the plant. I had to learn how to take that flat drawing and relate it back to things that I could see. I'm a visual thinker, but I had to learn how to take a square on a drawing and make it become a concrete column in my mind.
Wow. That's fascinating. It came to you at such an early age. I know with myself, I was 35 when I kind of went through my mental health crisis, 5-day inpatient stay, and part of the program was art therapy. And up until that time, I didn't believe I was a good artist. And so that was in my mind of, well, if I'm not good at something, I can't do it. But what I found through the program was it didn't matter how good I was as an artist, that, like you mentioned, the process, the detail that goes into it, how important that was. And I think that once I realized that, I found myself being more interested in art for myself, not just for other purposes. And that's how I met Heidi, is through my one of my group therapies coming out of the hospital. How has been, I'm gonna say, like, I know you have an expanded career, but how's been the feedback on the art side when you would share others, when you mentioned
well,
that?
I had to learn I was doing the drawings professionally, so the way I sold jobs was to simply show off my drawings.
Okay.
Here's one of my drawings right here in one of my books.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, there's one of my drawings. And what I learned to do was to show off my work. I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I designed the front end of every cargill beef plant in North America back in the late 80s to early 90s. And the way I sold those jobs was showing off the work.
Okay.
I had to do work that other people wanted. So I'd show off the drawings and I'd show off the pictures of other completed projects.
Okay.
I learned to sell my work
Okay.
rather than myself. And the thing that I see with a lot of parents, parents will say, my kid's really a good artist. but then they don't think to put some of that artwork on their phone.
Yeah.
Maybe they could sell some commissions for their kid.
Yeah.
That doesn't even cross their mind, because there's some autistic artists, like Grandin, the eco artist, makes beautiful artwork, horses and other animals with ripped paper. I mean, he's sold some, $5,000, $10,000 pieces of art on commission.
Wow. Great. Heidi, do you wanna jump in with
Yeah, the first thing I was thinking about was your shoe. I have so many ideas that I'm thinking about right now. But I was thinking about the shoe drawing and how that, I don't know whether they would have called it contour line drawing at the time, where you're looking at the item and you don't really look at the paper very much. And
Well,
you're
that's
thinking,
kind of what we did, and we had to take the entire class period to draw it. They recommended just drawing really, really light, and drew the shoe in 3 dimensions. They had us put it at the 3/4 position, so that it wasn't completely sideways, it wasn't straight on, and to try to like almost trace the shoe onto the paper.
okay,
And one of the things they did was to make you really slow down.
yeah,
And that's another thing when I started doing drafting, the slowing down and using the ruler. Then I could see exactly how a fence might be set in a concrete curb, and then draw that.
yeah, I'm thinking about it in terms of like mindful awareness, like really being present and thinking, not like I'm drawing a shoe, but like I'm drawing where this line connects to this one and how these two compare with each other, that sort of thing.
Well, here's
And
another
then,
one of my drawings right here.
Okay.
yeah, they're just so beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
really drawn into
lots
them.
of detail, and I would draw a drawing so that the people working in the field could see exactly how to build it.
Right.
And that ties in so much with what you've been talking about career. I mean, in the book, visual thinking, and in some of your presentations, um, taking people's interests and helping them use it in a way that's very productive.
That's right. That's right. And ending up in a career. I just recently heard about a lady with autism that went into cake decorating.
Ah.
And an interview for her was showing off pictures of the cakes, and the bakery instantly hired her. And that's a real recent example. The other thing that's good about doing things with something like drawing is there's no multitasking. She'd be
Right.
working on one cake at a time, and then you'd go on to the next cake. But that's an example of something where you're selling the work.
So for our listeners and viewers, autism, I myself, I'm on the lower end of the spectrum, the sounds, the lights. When you mentioned on the phone earlier today about working the McDonald's drive-through and having to do all these different things, like all that is just so complex to myself. At what point in your life were you made aware of autism in yourself?
Well, I had speech delay
Okay.
until I was 4, so it's obvious I had a problem. But there's a lot of other people where there's no speech delay. Oftentimes it shows up when the kid's 7 or 8 years old and they have no friends. There's also adults that get diagnosed later on in life, and that diagnosis can often give them a lot of insight because it will explain why they've been socially awkward. And it's almost a relief to find out. But on the other hand, I'm seeing situations where a teenager has got an autism label or maybe some other label, and they're getting so pampered and overprotected, they're not learning skills like shopping,
Yes.
and everything's getting done for them. And these are things that I learned in elementary school.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue, not learning basic skills.
Right.
You've said your concerns about the trades that
This is what I've talked about in my book, Visual Thinking. We have a huge shortage, high-end skilled trades. Let me just give you some examples.
Please.
The U.S. no longer makes the state-of-the-art electronic chip-making machine, food processing equipment, poultry processing plant, for example. All the equipment is coming in from Holland. And it goes back to our educational system. You see in Holland and other countries like Germany and Denmark and Italy, kids choose in 9th grade to go vo-tech route or university route. And there's a lot of good jobs in high-end skilled trades. I can tell you, that artificial intelligence will not replace. I can see some web design, low-level programming, stuff like that, just going right out with AI, but that's not going to make the heating and air conditioning work, or the water system work, or the electrical system work. And there's a tendency to look at those. In Europe, they don't look down on that. Where here, just the other day, I was on a Zoom call, like less than a week ago, with a local high school animal science class, and I had a girl come up, they'd come up to the mic to answer the question and say, my guidance counselor told me not to take any vo-tech stuff.
Oh.
Well, I think that's really bad, because I can see in the future, those are the jobs that are not going to go away.
Yeah, right.
I'm watching AI really, really carefully. I can see a lot of low-level coding stuff getting taken over by AI.
Something that really stood out to me was the part about the some of the things you've been saying recently about there being so much emphasis on verbal skills, and then also what you had to say about algebra. I totally
Well,
get that.
algebra, you see, a lot of the people I worked with, people that owned large metalworking shops, they couldn't do algebra either, because it's
Right.
too abstract.
Right.
And you have to be able to do arithmetic. But I'm seeing students that want to become a veterinary nurse, or even a regular nurse for people, on their second and third algebra class, and that's going to keep them from becoming a nurse or a veterinary nurse.
Yeah.
Yes, arithmetic, drug dosing they got to do in their sleep. That's non-negotiable.
Right.
But that math can be memorized. And there's other things you need algebra for. Quantum computing, you'll need it for that. You'll need it for orbital mechanics. I mean, a whole bunch of engineering stuff. But there's a whole lot of other stuff where you don't need it.
Right.
And the thing that's going to be ironic, watching the AI stuff coming in, is hands-on skilled trades not going to get replaced by AI.
No.
Right. Yep.
Neither will things like, okay, you're a counselor.
Oh, yeah.
People are always going to want the human connection. Look what happened to Peloton. They had all this fancy exercise equipment for use at home. They about went broke. People want to go back and exercise with other people.
With a person, yeah.
Yeah, with
Right.
other people. They have their exercise buddies they see every
Right.
times
Yeah.
a week.
You have multiple works and multiple media platforms. When did you feel like sharing your experience was really taking hold, where you wanted to share that, through books and let people know about it? Because some people are introverted and they don't feel comfortable sharing, but you're sharing, and it's awesome.
I first got asked to share. When I was in Arizona, there's an occupational therapist named Lorna Jean King, and she had me, start out with some very, very small meetings. But in terms of, for all through the 80s and the 90s, I never told customers about it.
Okay.
I just, I let my work sell itself. I made myself very good at my work. Just like the lady with the cake decorator.
Yeah.
She's on the spectrum, but her work decorating cakes is really good. And it's making yourself good at a skill that other people want and appreciate. Now, I could see AI laying out cattle handling facilities. But the thing that it's not going to do is when you got some real mess in a plant with equipment, it's not going to fix that.
No, it's not.
It's not going to fix that. And I had a chance to go visit a big biomedical laboratory, they call a biosecurity level 4 lab. You got the people in the spacesuits.
Yeah.
You know what I learned about that building?
What's
There
that?
are 4 floors on that building.
Okay.
The second floor is the labs. The other 3 floors are support equipment. 3 floors of support equipment. 1 floor of labs. And it's all high-end skilled trade stuff. A bunch of it. HVAC on steroids. A bunch of other stuff. Without high-end skilled trades, that lab would not operate, period. They wouldn't be able to run it.
No.
You said
Not just
something.
build it, operate it.
You said something a minute
Example,
ago.
I just was there just a week ago.
Wow. Yeah, that's recent. I mean,
Yeah, that's real recent. That's now.
that's now. It's not, yeah.
And the thing about the girl asked me the question about the guidance counselor said she shouldn't take a vo-tech class, that was less than a week ago.
Oh, wow. That's terrible. That's a shame. But
Yes. Yeah.
Because these are the jobs I'm looking really, really carefully. It reminds me of that old Westworld movie where they have all the robots there, and there's one maintenance man fixing the fountain, and he said, "I have to have a few people like me because the robots and water don't mix very well."
no, they don't. Yeah. Heidi,
I
I
was
need to
think,
jump in.
yeah, I'm excited because I have like a million questions, but I was thinking about this is a statement too, but the idea that some people would think that people with autism lack empathy and how that seems really absurd to me, depending on the person.
Well,
And
I have a
I'm,
lot of empathy for physical hardship. Like I've looked at awful pictures after a storm or after a war or something like that.
yeah,
Foreign people standing in the ruins of their house, standing in a broken apartment building in a broken apartment. I
right.
I have
Yeah.
a lot of empathy for physical hardship. That
Well, and
really,
then,
really it really sucked to go back and your house is just a pile of splinters.
yeah, but even in some of your writings, when you talk about like getting inside of, I don't remember what it was called, but you got inside of a space to look at what the perspective would be
Well,
from
that
the
was
view.
looking at what cattle were seeing. So my
Yeah,
very first work I ever did, I got down into cattle chutes to see what cattle were seeing. And they're
yeah,
afraid of stuff like shadows, things
Oh,
we tend to not pay attention to, shadows and reflections and the sun shining in their eyes, stuff we don't tend to notice. Well, I didn't realize at the time that many other people think verbally, but I think visually. In my book on visual thinking,
yeah.
hmm,
I discuss the three kinds of thinking. I'm an object visualizer, so we're good at animals, photography, skilled trades, and art.
Yeah.
And then you have your mathematical mind, music and math, and then you have verbal thinkers, and then you have mixtures of the different kinds of thinkers. And so for a visual thinker, it was obvious to look at what cattle were looking at. And I
right.
didn't find out until I was in my late 30s that a lot of other people thought in words.
I feel like, I don't know if this was what it was like for you, but I could imagine being inside that chute, thinking, I'm going to get in there and see what it looks like to them, and then thinking, oh my gosh, no wonder. Like, no wonder this is upsetting to them. That to me, whether I might not be saying it exactly the way that would have felt to you, but that to me feels like empathy.
Well, yeah, and I'm imagining, the cattle don't know what it is. I get asked all the time if cattle know they're going to get slaughtered. Well, they're more afraid of a shadow that looked like a spider
Right.
that appeared for about an hour every afternoon when the sun was out, and they wouldn't walk over the spider monster shadow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, this is fascinating. So we talked a little bit about the algebra, screening
Well, you see,
out
the
potentially.
problem is the algebra is too abstract.
Yes.
I need to convert things to a picture. The other problem I have, and this caused some people to lose some good skilled trade jobs like electrician apprentice and building fencing, is the boss would yak, boom, 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 do this, ceiling lamp, blah, 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 light switch, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
junction box, something else. And I cannot remember long strings of verbal information.
Yeah.
And what needs to be done in that situation is let the person just make a pilot's checklist of the things they're supposed to install, or if it's close out the Walmart cash register at the end of the shift, just a bullet of what are the closing out of the cash register steps. Just they need an external working memory,
Mhm.
and I would need that to do these jobs. And even on my design jobs, we'd have a meeting, and I'd very clearly, what is the outcome of this project? I'd know exactly which land I could put it on, what the railroad right of way is, what the change speed of the plant was, all the things, all parameters, the great big water pump. Yep, I had to design around that. You could not take that out.
No.
You see, and I would have all of this stuff written down beforehand.
So you would have something like a list with bullet points, something
Yep,
like that.
exactly what I did.
And you could even say you had like something like an index card with bullet points and then just, put a plastic sheet over it or something. That is so
Well,
much better
let's
than,
say another kind of thing, because I have to have an external working memory. here's a job a little more hard that I'd have a lot of trouble with. Let's say I get a job at the airport as a gate agent.
Oh, yeah.
You know, okay. Now that's not as complicated as a ticket agent. There's like 12 things you got to do on that computer. You know, print boarding passes, find seats, print boarding passes, gate check bags. Now, if somebody just goes boom, 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 quick like that, showing me, I can't remember that sequence.
I can't either.
Cannot remember that sequence. So if I had to do that job, let's say today, I'd have to go somewhere that's not busy. Okay, now show me the key sequence for gate checking a bag. And I'd write them down. Printing a boarding pass, and I'd write them down. Then I would go home and practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I might even make a jingle up.
Mhm.
Now, the kind of stuff I'd be good at, where frozen jet bridges, I want to make that problem go away. I have sat on a plane for an hour,
Oh,
frozen jet bridge. You see, that's the kind of stuff I understand. How can we prevent that from happening? I'd find out exactly what was freezing on them and try to figure out a way to prevent that. You see, that's something I'd be good at, getting rid of frozen jet bridges that don't move.
It's
And
meaningful.
the person where you can just show once how to do the keystrokes, that person wouldn't know what to do with a frozen jet bridge. This is
Right.
where we need all the different kinds of minds.
Right.
Need them all. Because the thing with the frozen jet bridge, we got to prevent it from getting frozen.
that's right.
That's the thing. But then you got to find out what's happening. Is the wheel just spinning on the ground? Or is what thing telescopes? Is what's getting ice in it there where it won't telescope? You see, I see it.
Yeah.
And that's my new example, so I'm not giving you yucky meat plant examples.
No, I mean, you're starting with the end in mind, and that makes it, to me, being on the spectrum and Heidi, to be able to see an end, not just a part of the process. And I think some jobs, that's all you do. You just do a piece of the process.
There was 3 good skilled trades jobs lost because this is recent. These are recent. This is where they didn't write down a checklist. Okay, what they're supposed to do. These were electrical things.
Okay.
What things they were supposed to install, order they were installing. And if they just spent 2 minutes jotting them down, they wouldn't have lost the job.
Yeah.
And okay, this problems with working memory. This comes up all the time. And then rapid multitasking jobs like a McDonald's takeout window want to avoid those.
Yeah. Heidi, I think you had
That's
something.
just so the heat, the sound, the overwhelming social aspect of it, the light, and then, like you're saying, the working memory.
Working memory now with the light, one of the biggest problems in indoor environment where there's no windows or limited windows is flicker on LEDs and fluorescent lights. The number one problem. And the way you can diagnose that is to take your high-end fancy new phone, film the room in slow motion. Now I'd wave because then I'm going to play it back. I got to make sure it's moving slow. It's really slow motion. And you can find those lights that flicker. And it not only bothers autistic people, but it also bothers people with head injuries. Like veterans, for example, sometimes are bothered by that. And so what do I do if I'm stuck in an office where the lights are terrible? You need to get a lamp from home, find a really bright LED or some other thing that doesn't flicker and put it next to your desk.
Oh.
That's the thing you would need to do, or get over by a window. And I always like to try to figure out simple accommodations. And
those light
things that people can do and not lose jobs because you write down the things you were supposed to do. And the way I would explain it to the boss is if pilots need a checklist, I need one too.
That's right.
FFA requires it for every single flight.
And you want that as a passenger, right? I mean,
Well, of course.
you don't want somebody to be like, I'm going to wing it. No.
And they're starting to do pilot checklists in medicine now for surgery. Make sure they don't leave anything inside a person.
Right.
So something that motivates you and helps you use your gifts is knowing that it's meaningful. The work is meaningful, but
you're doing something that you see, like you take a nonverbal person with autism and they make them put pegs in a board and then take them out and put them back in again. They know that's fake work. No, they need to be doing something that's real work.
And
not just make busy work.
Right.
the examples that you've given, some of them have been safety related. That stands out to me when you mentioned the bridge and some of the things with the cattle. Sounds like things that have to do
Well,
with.
I have a whole chapter in visual thinking on disasters. Okay,
Okay.
mathematicians, you need the visual thinkers like me to tell
Mhm.
you we should have put watertight doors on the Fukushima nuclear power plant to protect the electrically driven emergency cooling pump that's not going to run underwater.
Right.
I can't design a nuclear reactor, but all I know is that that pump doesn't run when I need it. The results are horrible.
Something else that stands out to me about your process is the idea of trying to back things up and in sequence and then prevent it.
Well, yeah, and you see seeing stuff. Okay, that bridge that fell down, I put in the afterward. They probably hadn't painted it. And it was a pretty flimsy bridge where you can't have too much rust eating into it. If they'd painted it, it probably wouldn't have fallen down. You can't lose half the steel wall thickness on that type of bridge. See, I just see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I even
Yeah.
think of when I was growing up, I would see my mom making a list to go to get groceries at the grocery store, but then I would see her making lists to, like you said, just maybe smaller tasks, and I, being naive growing up, I was like, oh, that's just what old people do. Like when I get older, that's just what they do. But now seeing myself, it really bridges that. Use the bridge to your thinking in your work, to be able to just have a checklist to make sure you're doing what you're set out to do. So if you want to do thing A, you need to know the 3 steps, like you said, to do thing A. You don't need to know what to do thing B or C. And when it's written down, it helps, and it helps free the mind a little bit. And
Well, I worked with a lot of people that I know were autistic in the high-end metalworking skilled trades that owned shops, had multiple patents, were selling stuff around the world. They were most had barely graduated from high school, taken a welding class, and if they hadn't taken that welding class, they wouldn't have been making the stuff.
Right.
And then on the mathematical side, also I've seen a lot of people on the autism spectrum, computer programmers, people in physics, and so. The thing about autism, it's a true continuous trait.
Yeah.
Going from Einstein, who had no speech till age 3, to somebody who's nonverbal that cannot dress themselves. I think it was a big mistake when they took the Asperger's out, which is basically socially awkward with no speech delay, merged it in with autism where there is speech delay.
Wait, could you clarify? I
Well,
just
see,
missed
the way
part of
you
your
got to remember
sentence.
the diagnostic protocols are not, verify the lab tests. Like, okay, we do a test on you until you get tuberculosis.
Right.
That's a very, very definitive test. It's based on a behavioral profile. You see, and for years it used to be autistic, you had to have speech delay.
Okay.
Then
So-
the Asperger's, which is autistic traits, but no speech delay.
Okay. So I know
the
that
Asperger
there's.
type are not going to get diagnosed when they're 3.
Right.
They knew something was drastically wrong with me when I was 2.5.
Right. So it would help if we had clarity on that. And there are words that are upsetting to people like high functioning and low
Well,
functioning.
I've taken that out of myself. My old publications say that. I've been around for almost over 30 years. I
Yeah.
don't use that term anymore.
Yeah, I'm not.
All my newer stuff that's been removed. Old stuff
Yeah,
that's still
yeah,
there,
and
I
I'm not.
can't.
I understand where people are coming from, so I'm just speaking gently.
I'd rather just say fully verbal or non-verbal.
So
Yeah, say what it
Some of your
is.
non-verbals, there's some good books written by people who type independently that are non-verbal.
right. And then I know that there's a lot of debate around the term Asperger's because of the man named Dr. Asperger, I
Yeah,
believe.
he did some bad things.
Okay.
But they another thing to call it is simply autism with no speech delay.
Right. Okay.
That's basically what it is.
So again, what you're talking about is not adding layers of judgment or using words in a way that like just adds so much, but it's just very functional.
Well,
Like,
I just found that for me, the way I sold jobs, I worked freelance on this for many, many years, was simply showing off the drawings, showing off the pictures of jobs, and then I was writing in the trade press. I mean, every field has its trade press. Even car washes. They had some magazine called Auto Laundry News, and I wrote in the trade press about how to handle cattle and how to design facilities in magazines like Beef.
so there's just I mean, I like what you're saying. I like this theme that I hear over and over again that is about being effective, like thinking about what works.
Well, that's right. And the other thing is, I've written extensively about problems with anxiety.
Yeah.
I had terrible, terrible problems with anxiety. And I wrote about that in my book, Thinking in Pictures, my autobiography that came out over 25 years ago. It's got a new updated afterward. I've been on antidepressant medication for 40 years, and I'm still on it. And what it did is it stopped the horrible panic attacks, absolutely horrible panic attacks that were pure biology. When I was in my late 20s, I had nonstop colitis that wouldn't stop. I went on the antidepressants, then the colitis cleared up because my nervous system was no longer in a constant state of fright over nothing. And the mistake that's made with drugs like Prozac, for example, is too high a dose. The label doses for depression are too high. For anxiety, you might only need a starter dose or less than a starter dose.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. Too much, you get agitation, and then you cannot sleep.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with the anxiety medication. I'm at the starter dose, and I've been on it for 5
Which one are you on?
Ativan.
Okay.
Lorazepam is both of those names. But I've been on that starter dose since I was kind of started to deal with my life, and so the depression medicine, as well as the anxiety. I'm at that starter dose, and my therapist, my former therapist, he was even surprised at so many years past that he's like, oh, you're only taking 0.5 versus people are taking multiple times a day.
Well, the mistake that's made with antidepressants is that you're going to get these little relapses.
Yeah.
And the anxiety goes in cycles. And I toughed out the relapses. It's sort of like before I went on the medication, let's just use a car speeding analogy. My nervous system was cycling up here 200 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. Then when I went on the medication, and this is back when they had the double nickel, the 55 mile an hour speed limit, then it's going 55 to 100, cycling where before it was cycling up here. And I just stayed on the same dose. And I have seen disastrous messes when people were very stable on a medication and they went off of it. Complete disastrous messes. And then when they went back on, it sometimes does not work.
Oh.
You fry the circuit boards upstairs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Especially with bipolar, that's true.
What? So looking at your career, I'm just wondering from some of our viewers and listeners, what do you think of at the end of the day, Dr. Temple Grandin? What do you feel one of the biggest accomplishments that you have that somebody could look at and say, I relate to that?
Well, I've got accomplishments. I'm proud of things I've improved in the cattle industry, for example. I'm also proud of when people write to me and say that my kid went to college because of one of your books or one of your interviews really helped. I want to help the minds that think differently to be successful. I also do a lot of talks on the different kinds of minds to business leaders like steel company, pharmaceutical company, banks, all kinds of companies, computer firms. And I say, you need the skills. You need the skills of the different kinds of minds. Like I went and I visited that lab. I can tell you, without high-end skilled trades, that lab ain't going to operate, period.
No.
Somebody's got to maintain those 3 floors of equipment.
Right.
and it's not for the beginner stuff.
Thank you for that. Heidi,
No, I knew it would have a support equipment, but it had twice as much support equipment than what I imagined.
yeah.
Well, I have a few more questions, but the one that really keeps coming to mind for me is to ask you a little bit more. I think years ago I read something that you wrote about, I think it was windows, but it might have been gateways.
Well, I always had kind of door symbols. See, the thing is, when you think visually, I don't have abstract thinking. So when I was very young and I had a much smaller database, see, I'm a bottom-up thinker, just like ChatGPT. And when I got older, I could think better than when I was younger because I got more data in the database.
Oh.
Right.
And I learned from an English teacher while I was up visiting this lab, went to a beautiful little autism community center, and we sat at the little kids' art table in grown-up chairs. And I sat across from an English teacher, and she said she caught 6 of her students cheating with ChatGPT in English class. And she said the papers that it wrote in November were worse than the papers it wrote 4 months later. In other words, ChatGPT's learned how to write better fake student papers.
Wow.
You see, that's an example
Yeah.
of learning as more and more data is put in the database. So if you don't have much data in the database, I have to have a visual image to think with.
Yeah.
So I looked at things like my futures, going through doors, and that was shown really nicely in the HBO movie Temple Grandin.
Yeah.
Okay. That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that. But wasn't it written about? Was that also in one of Oliver Sacks' books?
Yeah, he would have, written about that. And but one thing that gave me a lot of insight is when I realized that, other people think differently.
Uh-huh.
But as being a total visual thinker, for things like designing assessment systems for animal welfare, I just take a real practical approach that people can, do out in the field.
I've been using the visual spatial identifier.
Oh yeah,
by-
little test that's in the visual
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, I've been using that with some of my supervisees. And that is interesting for the scoring on it, but it's really interesting for the discussion of each question.
Well, yes, because it's different approaches to thinking. See, a verbal thinker tends to overgeneralize. A visual thinker gets down and gets a lot more detail. Now, the thing I've had to learn, and we have a principle in food safety called HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. And I love this because you can't have all the details. You have to figure out which details are the critical control points, the ones that are really important. Sort of, let's look at traffic rules. Probably the 3 most important things to enforce would be drunk driving, speeding, and running stop signs and red lights. And then 4 and 5 would be seatbelts and texting.
Yeah.
You see, those would be the true critical control points. Turn signals are important, but that's much lower priority than drunk driving is.
Yeah, I see everything that your works and speaking with you today seems to be kind of at a macro level. You want to help people, so you want to help bad things from happening, things to get better, people to not be laid off from work, and that's I think awesome that in today's day and age that somebody like yourself has that in mind, that helping others, which some may look at as like, oh, that's too basic or too simple. That's exactly how I feel.
Well,
and
the
so
thing is the simple stuff, a lot of times people aren't doing it. I'm seeing it's a 16-year-old that's labeled autistic, and everything's being done for him, and this kid has never gone in a store and bought something by themselves. Ordering food by themselves at a restaurant.
Oh.
Just basic things like that, they're not doing. They get so the parents get so locked into the label, they can't imagine that their kid's even capable of doing anything.
Right. Yeah. Heidi, did you have another question or two before we end our time with Dr. Grandin?
Wondered if there was anything around the doors that you had ever done that had anything to do with any art or depiction of that.
Well, not really. I've had photographs of real doors, and so I hadn't really done any art with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the All the drawings in here are by you, right?
Yes, yes, they are. In
Okay.
fact, I wanted to put more pictures in this,
Mhm.
but they said it's too expensive. Yeah, those are my drawings. Yeah, those are my drawings that are in there, and we're going to be coming out with the children's edition.
Oh, good.
That's going to have a lot more illustrations in it. Yeah, I had somebody write a review on this saying, book on visual thinking without pictures. I can tell you right now, the publisher didn't want to spend the money
No.
on
No.
putting pictures in there, because I would have put more drawings
Yeah.
in there and some photographs of jobs, um, uh, but they wouldn't let me.
I do have
Because
one
those
other.
pictures that, they don't want to put those nice glossy pages in there that,
I
they're,
like it just the way it is with the matte page and the drawings. It's just
well,
so appealing.
we got those, I got them to put in those drawings as sort of the beginnings of chapters.
Mhm.
And they could print that on the same regular paper.
Yeah.
And then I made sure they got them dark enough so you could see them.
Exactly.
Originally did it, they were too light. I said, we got to have it so that you can see those.
Yeah.
But I guess part of the problem is that a lot of the book editors are verbal thinkers, and the drawings are less important to them.
Oh, they're
Um,
beautiful. And
If they're a
so
total verbal thinker, the drawings are a lot less important.
yeah.
I did want to ask one other thing that's it feels a little off topic, but it's coming to mind. It's not really off topic. I can't remember the exact name of the research study that had to do with the game Telephone. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
I think
We
that
used to play that game as a kid, and by the time you'd gone through like 10 kids, you just start
Yeah.
okay. So here's how I understand it. You've got 3 groups, and in each group you have 2 groups. So you would have people who have like neurodiversity with people who have neurodiversity playing it, and then over here you'd have typicals and typicals playing it. I'm not sure all the proper terms, And then in the other group, you'd have people who were neurotypical with people who are typical, and that group had the worst trouble communicating with one another. This is my
Well,
understanding.
the other thing that we'll tell you about some studies that I did include in the book that I remember really well.
Mhm.
It was a really cool study with students from different types of high schools, an art-oriented high school, a science-oriented high school, and a literature and humanities oriented high school. And teams of students had the job of creating a new planet.
Okay.
All they were told, create a new planet, and there were teams of students. So
Okay.
art students come up with crystal planets, skyscraper planets, polar bears, and palm trees.
Mhm.
And then your science students made a round circle, described the atmosphere, kind of boring. And then the verbal students started writing stuff down. Then they realized that it was an art project, so they made splotches.
Oh,
But you know what really shocked me about this study?
what's that?
Verbal students did absolutely no planning,
Oh.
where the visual students and the math students did planning. Because this is the problem with a lot of verbal concepts, is overgeneralization.
Yeah.
You might talk about being more inclusive. Well, okay, how do you actually do that?
Yeah.
I'd rather look at specific examples that worked and maybe specific examples where something did not work, due to maybe the flickering of the lighting.
Mhm.
I want to get a lot more specific, and I've kind of figured out some of the critical control points at work. The flickering lighting, the rapid multitasking jobs, and then working memory problems with long strings of verbal instruction, and then with tasks that involve sequence presented rapidly where I can't write it down.
Yeah.
They're working memory issues. And the accommodations are easy. But people will say, oh, they didn't give me accommodations. So then I go, now what accommodations do you need?
Right.
And I'm finding over and over again, rapid multitasking, crazy takeout window, let's avoid it. And long strings of verbal instruction don't work. Pilots need a checklist. I need one too.
Yeah.
And there'd be a bunch of jobs that would not have been lost if a couple of minutes had been made to jot down the checklist. You've got some jobs, like keystrokes on a computer, that you use the same thing every day, so you learn that once. But that, let's say you're on a construction project, every day they're going to give me new stuff to install. I need to spend 2 minutes, just write them down in the order they want them done. I would need to do that. That's a very simple accommodation. And I like to find simple, practical ways to make these things better rather than just arguing, well, that's terrible, they didn't do accommodations.
Yeah.
But again, that oftentimes it's thought about in way too abstract a way.
Yeah, I agree. As an instructor at a university, that's sometimes how the accommodations are. They're very broad, they're very general, and they don't get, because I think they want to make it, I hope not, but I think they just want to make it easy for themselves and not really look at things specifically.
Well, a common accommodation at the university is extra time on tasks.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very, very common one. But I think, you see, the thing is, I think in specific example.
Exactly.
So, rapid multitasking jobs, that's come up over and over again. Now I found out about 2 electrician apprentice jobs lost, a fencing job lost, because they couldn't write down what they were supposed to do. You see, then I'm starting to see a pattern here. You see, it's bottom-up thinking.
Yeah.
And so the whole pilot's checklist idea. Okay, let's say I got to close out the Walmart cash register. Let me just write down the steps. That's a very simple accommodation.
It is.
And then after I've done it for 2 weeks, I probably won't need the checklist anymore. So you got 2 kinds of situations. A job, let's say computer keystroke stuff, only have to learn that once. And then jobs where your list of tasks you do changes every day. So I need to jot down a new pilot's checklist every day. You see how I'm like, this is similar to the HACCP critical control points.
Yeah.
And these patterns I'm finding as I talk to people, I keep learning. It's like ChatGPT learns better and better to write fake student English papers.
Exactly. And instead of having more time, which that's fair, but why? To your point, why do they need this? Why do they need that more time? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it.
That's a common one.
Yeah.
The more time is extremely common. Yeah. That's just one of the things sometimes you have to accommodate. But things like the pilot's checklist thing, if that was just done up front, that would save a tremendous amount of jobs from being lost. Because people get mad and say, look, I already showed you how to work that fry machine at McDonald's. Are you stupid? I need to write down the steps, especially for cleaning it or setting it up with new oil. Let me just write down the steps. And if the boss thinks that's stupid, remind them that the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, requires pilots to use a checklist every single flight.
Exactly. And we're all human beings, so we need checklists.
Yeah, but that's I like to try to figure out practical stuff that people can take home and do. And then the lighting issue that and it's not just autism, head injuries. People with head injuries often have problems with the lights flickering.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
and you
so
can't
I'm trying to
see that.
I take a very practical approach to this.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a shame to lose 2 electrician apprenticeships because you didn't write down the different things you were supposed to install in the order you were supposed to install them. And that would have taken 2 minutes to write it down.
You know, when you mentioned the lights flickering, it reminded me of something else. So there are times when lights flicker and it's so subtle that you don't realize it for a while.
Yeah.
It's just very tiny. And if you're in that lighting and you have something like a head injury or symptoms of autism, it could be that it would take 5 hours before you'd end up with a migraine or feeling like you were going to get
The thing
sick.
is that people with migraines can get this. I want to, in new construction, let's just not use lights that flicker. And I learned from a lighting contractor at a book table a couple of years ago about this trick with filming the room in slow motion on your phone and then playing it back in slow motion. So I recommend waving. Make sure when I play it back, it's slow motion.
Well, one of my thoughts about it is when a person's having an issue, it seems like being patient for a long time might be needed to figure out what the issue is. And I would imagine with your
the thing I'm finding is there's certain issues that keep coming up over and over and over again. The lighting issue. When I have architects come to me, I say the single most important thing: make sure you get lights that don't flicker. Test them with the phone.
Right.
And then the multitasking, the crazy rapid multitasking. I want to avoid that. That's a failure. And and overloading them with blah 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 blah, long strings of verbal instruction. I want to avoid that. Because these are critical control points that have been coming up over and over again. Of very common accommodations that we need to do. and they're easy to do.
Another problem with verbal instruction is when an individual is given 2 steps and then told a related story, and then given 2 more steps and told some other anecdote. And it's like, just stay on track,
Yeah, stay.
give the bullet points, maybe have to do it 2 or 3 times, write it down, but not with like a whole
The thing
bunch
that
of,
I think is really important is write it down.
right,
Because when these jobs were lost, like a guy a guy worked for a fencing company for years, got a new boss, lost his job because he didn't write down what fences he was supposed to build and built them wrong, and lost a job. I talked to this person, and if he had just written it down, he wouldn't have lost the job.
right,
And this is recent. That's a year and a half ago.
yeah,
This is not something from 25 years ago. This stuff's the electrician's apprentice. That's a couple of months ago.
right,
This is right now.
Right.
yep,
So what I want to, and I love that critical control point approach, because as I like kind of pick up case histories, I'm now categorizing the places where I need the pilot's checklist, the places where jobs ought to be just avoided, chaotic stores during the holidays.
right,
One McDonald's made a very nice accommodation. The autistic lady was running the cash register, and when the store got busy, they had her clean tables.
Ah, yes.
Just a nice, simple thing they just did in that store.
yeah,
So she could handle the cash register if it wasn't too busy.
right.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Grandin, I think we're at the end of our time together for the podcast. I want to give a huge thank you for you taking the time, given such detail stories over the span of your life, and they're very practical, and I know that our viewers and listeners are going to find them extremely useful. And I want to invite our viewers and listeners also to check out templegrandin.com, which they can find more information about Dr. Grandin, all the works that her current, her past works. All her books are available in her most recent book, Autism and Education, the way I see
That's
it.
aimed more at younger kids.
Okay.
My stuff, I have another book called Different Not Less, which is the 18 people later in life getting diagnosed and writing about it. I think a lot of people would find that helpful.
Okay.
And my new visual thinking book, where I talk about the different kinds of thinking and why we need them. My autobiography,
Yep.
I have a chapter in there on anxiety, and I'm one of these people where I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't discovered the medication a long time ago, and I'm still on it. That's why I'm drinking so much water, because that's one of the side effects. But I don't even know if I'd be alive, because if I hadn't taken it, because the colitis was ripping my guts out. And 2 weeks after I went on the medication, it's almost completely cleared up. I still have a little tiny bit of it, but it just about almost fixed it.
Fantastic.
And it was like the old DuPont slogan, better living through chemistry.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Okay, it's been good to be here.
Absolutely. We're going to take a couple pictures, so don't sign out quite yet.
Oh, okay, I won't sign off yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll just close out for the TV and audio portion. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Voices for Voices podcast. And a huge thank you to our guest, Dr. Temple Grandin. Wealth of information. Please check out templegrandin.com. Seek out her works. Thank you for spending time with us today. And until next time, I hope you have a great day, and please be a voice for you or somebody in need.